A 15-year-old teenager from Glasgow was the personification of wicked, evil and cruel. The teenager, who had major issues with authority, had forced the police to cordon off a section of Glasgow's Victoria Road after he had attacked a shopkeeper for no other reason than he could on April 12th. Now, the shopkeeper, 65-year-old Nadeem Mohammed, had been jumped by the teenager at his news and off-sale store in April 12th just after 4 p.m. The teenager had been with pals loitering outside the store when they were shouting, chanting, yelling for Nadeem and his son to come out of the shop if they were bad. When Nadeem stood at the entrance of his new store, he was then struck with a hook before being bladed. The teenager then ran away to the safety of his home and then told his dad what he had done. Now, the teenager had issues, anger issues, and they were very real. Now, the teenager's dad went back to the scene of the crime and spoke to police. Now, it turned out the unnamed teenager had been armed with a blade and had lashed out at the unsuspecting shopkeeper, whom luckily managed to put his arm out to block a blade travelling towards him. Sadly, Nadeem Mohammed had been bladed once in the arm and then a second time in the stomach. Now, thankfully, Nadeem survived the incident, and the unnamed teenager, the menace, was arrested soon after. However, Scotland police deemed it fit to release the teenager on bail while they continued to investigate the incident. Now, even though the shopkeeper, Nadeem Mohammed, had been bladed not once but twice, this was not considered an attempted M. Now, the teenager was then released from the police station at roughly 11:15 p.m. and he was then picked up by his mum. However, on the way home, the teenager and his mum got into some kind of disagreement, and that turned into full-on shouting and argument. The 15-year-old teenager, the menace, was so mad that he literally climbed out of the car in a fit of rage. And then 30 minutes later, after being released from the custody of police, the 15-year-old had then approached an elderly man, 70-year-old Patrick Colquhoun. The retired taxi driver had been on his way home after drinking in his local pub, the Queen's Park Cafe on Victoria Road in Govan Hill. He then headed for his takeaway shop before going home. However, the teenager and Patrick were not known to each other. They didn't have any form of falling out or disagreements. However, the teenager, whom was still raging, had got into an argument with Patrick then, and then accused the 70-year-old of peeing on his dad's rental car. Now, in order to prove that the teenager was bigger and badder than Patrick, the 15-year-old struck Patrick with a closed fist, again for no other reason than he could. Patrick Colquhoun then stumbled backwards and then crashed to the ground. Sadly, when he fell, Patrick's head made contact with the curb of the pavement, and the noise of bone and pavement meeting was deafening. Patrick Colquhoun had suffered a bleed on the brain, a large skull fracture. Now, once again, the teenager did what he knew best. He ran away when members of the public rushed over to an injured Patrick and then began to administer first aid and also CPR. While everyone crowded round Patrick, it was said that the offender's dad left his home and then moved his car from the crime scene. Now, police were already aware of the teenager and his out-of-control behaviour, as they were already warned that the unnamed school kid was aggressive and had issues with authority. He thought he could solve all his problems by lashing out at people, and if that did not work, he could then use a blade as a problem solver. However, at 15 years old, the offender did not possess the ability to accurately piece together his actions or his thoughts and understand that what you do have consequences. That the teenager was arrested for a second time and had appeared at Edinburgh Crown Court. Sadly, Patrick Colquhoun had died. Now, during the trial, the judge commented that it was truly shocking that someone so young could have inflicted such unprovoked violence on two elderly gentlemen. In closing, the judge told the teenager that he could have imposed a 5-year jail sentence, but as he pled guilty earlier on, it was an indication of accepting responsibility for the blading of the shopkeeper and then King Patrick after an argument. In the end, the teenager was told that he would have to serve a mammoth 40-month sentence. 40 months. That was because of the early guilty plea. his age, and also the fact that a background report was conducted and it showed that the teenager had used weed and he was still a child technically and did not have much of a criminal record despite the two serious offences. So 40 months for killing a man after landing a hook on 70-year-old Patrick Colehorn head, and for blading a shopkeeper, Nadeem Mohammed, in the arm and in the stomach, after goading the shopkeeper to come outside. Let me know your thoughts on the case and the sentencing. Was it reasonable? And condolences. Stay safe. Safe.